Hi there. I'm Ron Taylor. I'm an educator, and I was just listening to a podcast, an educational podcast on ungrading a couple of minutes ago. And when I'm in the car, I do a lot of thinking about education and my job. And I thought, hey, maybe it's time I share my thoughts. And so while driving, I thought no better time than to drive and maybe have a little chat. So here we go. I figure I'll just narrow it down to one topic on this video. And on this one, I think I'll go with retakes. Back in the day when I first started teaching, I've been in education now for 20 years. Back in the day when I first started teaching, we never talked about retakes. It was just something that was never discussed. When I was in high school, I don't remember one person talking about retakes either. I graduated in 1997, and not once do I remember ever finishing, or receiving a test back from a teacher and saying, can I retake this? I don't think it was a thing. So anyway, maybe around like year, 12 or something like that in my teaching career, I started teaching in a new school where in Massachusetts, where the students in the middle school had been allowed to do retakes. And I think in middle schools that's something that's fairly common. And what ended up happening was these freshmen that were taking my geometry class did poorly on their first assessment, and they said, "Oh, I guess I'm going to retake this. When can I come in and retake it?" And I said, "I have no idea. That's not something I've ever even thought about. Let me talk to the other members of the math department and find out if that's something that we do." And I quickly learned it was not something that we do. In fact, I remember being embarrassed with just how stern the person was when I asked in the math department. I said, "Hey, do we do retakes?" And they looked me right in the eye, and as I said, sternly said, "That is not something we do here. Students need to study hard the first time." And I think right there, that statement signifies just how out of touch we are. If a student doesn't do well on an assessment, why is it that so many teachers believe that that student didn't put in their part, that they didn't do their part to perform well on the assessment? Sure, that's possible, but that's not always the case. And so we're missing opportunities to help students. Also, if a student did make mistakes, and by mistakes I mean they didn't prepare, they prepared poorly, let's put it that way, or they didn't prepare at all, or they didn't do some homework assignments, and that's why they did poorly on an assessment. Why is it that the educator feels as though they have the power to say, "I'm not giving you another chance to learn this"? Our job as educators is not to stifle learning, it's to promote learning. And so if a student came to us and said, "Can I redo this?" have a conversation. Ask, what went wrong the first time? What can we do differently moving forward? You could ask students to write a reflection. What do they do in preparation? What can they do differently? There can be systems put in place so that students just don't willy-nilly take, retakes and waste your time if you feel as though they're being disingenuous with their study skills and that sort of thing. So the problem with retakes is this. I eventually started in another school system that did allow retakes, and I was a big part of that. And the issue was that, I think I wanted to take that exit, but I can go this way as well. The issue is that teachers feel as though their grades are inflated once students retake an assessment. They think that they won't study the first time. They'll take an assessment, find out what they know and what they don't know, and then they'll retake it. And teachers fear that that's going to happen a lot. So that's why they put caps on things like only students that get below a 70% can retake it, and the highest grade you can get is a 70%. They're trying to find ways to make students make sure that they try the first time. I get it. It just, why stop? Why? I don't know. What if a student dominated a retake and earned a 98? We're really going to put a 70 down in the report card or on the in the grade book because they didn't know it the first time? Like, if they know it, they know it. So if we want our grade books to be accurate, don't we have to put in the 98 or whatever it was the second time? So again, going back to grade inflation, a lot of times teachers think, Well, they don't retain it. They just learn it in the moment to retake it, and then they move on and they forget it. And so rather than just saying this system doesn't work, why don't we continue to tweak it, try something different? So for instance, one thing I used to do with students, I've tweaked my policies a million times. I said, sure, you can retake things, but sometime within a month from the time you retake it, I'm going to have you retake it again. And you've got to show me that you've held on to it. And so sometimes students will, they'll raise their eyebrows on that one. Oh my goodness, I've got to retake it, do well, and then randomly sometime in the next month, my teacher's going to put a few problems down in front of me to make sure that I've retained what I demonstrated on my retake. And so what that did was it showed me if students actually had learned it, or if they just memorized a process and regurgitated it on the retake. I also shared with students that, hey, when I do ask you to demonstrate your understanding, within that month after you do your retake, if your assessment demonstrates or shows me that you haven't held on to it, we're going to change your grade to either what it originally was or whatever this assessment indicates that your current level of understanding is. I feel as though a grade book should be an indicator of a student's learning in that moment of time. It shouldn't be this, moments averaged over a term to determine a term grade. I feel like whenever you submit a term grade or whatever time somebody looks in the grade book, they should be able to see in that moment what your level of understanding was, not what it used to be, it should just be accurate, basically, is what I'm saying. So that was one way I got around it, and found ways to make retakes still available to students, but made it more authentic. Is that the right word? I just wanted it to be an indicator of what students truly knew. I wanted the grade book to indicate what students truly knew.
Object on road ahead.
So I need to make sure I avoid this object. I'm going to pay super close attention here. Okay. The kicker with retakes is this. That wasn't the best system either. Lots of times teachers hate them and never try them, or they don't like them initially, but they try them. They realize that students abuse them, and then they go right back to never doing them ever again because they tried it, students manipulated the system, and the grades were inflated, and they give up. Here's what I found absolutely works, and I've moved away completely from the word retake, and I share with students that they will have multiple opportunities to demonstrate understanding of the standards taught in a class. So students are given frequent, low stakes, high feedback assessments in pop assessment format. So students won't know when they're coming. They'll know they're coming, but they won't know when they're coming. And so on different days, I'll say, here's an assessment. It's on a few standards. I haven't told you about which standards it's going to, obviously it's on standards that we've taught and learned in the class previously, but I'm like, right now, today, I want to know what you know in the area of these two standards. Here's your assessment. Initially, students are like, oh my gosh, this is a pop assessment. What do I do if I don't understand? Well, no big deal if you don't understand. It's low stakes. Well, how can it be low stakes if it's a pop quiz and students don't know what's going to be on it? Well, it's low stakes because students have an opportunity to use the feedback on that assessment to identify their current level of understanding in those standards. But then they have an opportunity to come back to them at a later date, not a date that they're aware of, a date that I determine, and they'll have an opportunity to show me that they've grown their understanding. And say, 2 weeks from now, I assess them again on the same standards. Or it might be one of those two standards with an additional standard, whatever it may be. If a student demonstrates to me that they now have an understanding of it, that's great. And I update the grade book. I leave the initial score from the first assessment, but now I have a new one right next to it. I don't average them. It's just there in the grade book so I can see that they've grown. Let's say they earned a C the first time, and now they've earned a B. I'm not convinced that they have a B level of understanding. They just had a B level of understanding that day. So the next time they assess in a pop assessment format, boom, they take another couple of standards. We eventually come back to those initial standards, and they demonstrate a level of understanding of an A this time. By the end of a term, maybe 4 or 5 times we've assessed on the same standard, and many others as well. At the end of the term, I look at all of those grades and I say, what is the student's level of understanding for that standard today? And so if they started off with a C level of understanding and then moved to a B, and then to finish out the term, they finished with back-to-back A's or 3 A's in a row on that standard, I'd give them an A for that standard at the end of the term, because I want in my grade book the grade to represent what a student knows in that moment, not what they used to know and forgot. I want it to be what they know in that moment. And usually when I share this with people, they'll say, oh, Ron, what happens when it goes the other way? What happens when they had an A the first time? That happens a lot for students, right? They nail it. They get an A the first time, then they forget about it. So what happens then? Exactly what should happen. If the next time the student takes the assessment, they earn a C, and the next time after that, they earn a C, their level of understanding at that time, to me, is a C. I'm not averaging A, C, C. At that point, students will want us to. They'll be like, but I had an A the first time. But it's like, no, right now in this moment, I'm not going to use that A initially, because the last 2 or 3 times that you've taken an assessment on this standard, granted you haven't known they were coming, but you earned a C. So that is the accurate indicator of what you know at this time. The other day I was cleaning the house and I thought of this. I was cleaning it because somebody, a few people were coming over to visit. And I thought, when these people come over to visit and they walk in our house, they might say something like, wow, Ron, Meg, you guys have such a clean house. How do you keep it so clean? What they don't know is that I cram cleaned the night before, or that morning, right? Like I cram cleaned in a sense that I didn't want them to see all the kids' toys laying around everywhere. We did some dusting, all of that stuff. I fooled people into thinking that we have this incredibly tidy home. But what if those same people showed up randomly one day, knocked on the door and said, hey, we were in the neighborhood and we wanted to stop over and say hello? Wouldn't that give them a truer sense of how well I keep my house clean? If they just walk in randomly one day and see that the house is an absolute mess, then we start making excuses, right? Like, oh, I'm sorry, the house isn't normally like this. Normally it's clean. You just caught me at a bad time. And that happens to students on an assessment as well. We might catch students at a bad time on an assessment where they had a rough night, or something happened in the morning, or they woke up on the wrong side of the bed, whatever it might be. So the cleaning analogy, right? Like, if these people start showing up randomly, every once in a while, when they're in the neighborhood, they stop by, and I want to make sure the house is clean the next time, I'm going to start routinely cleaning up my house more often, because they might be stopping by and I want to make sure that it's clean. Well, now all of a sudden it's part of my routine and I'm cleaning more often, whether they're there or they're not. And my house is just cleaner more often. My analogy here is this: when students identify that they're struggling on a particular standard and they know you're going to come back to it on an undetermined day, they're going to try to be ready for it the next time. And if they are, that's great. But then they have to hold on to it. They can't forget it and go right back to their lack of understanding. They have to hold on to it. It has to become routine. When they identify something they don't know, they have to clean it up. They have to ask questions. They have to come in for extra help. They have to talk to a friend. They have to use YouTube. I don't care how they get the information. I'm going to provide them with a ton of resources. I just need to know that they understand it the next time we assess on it. So students, when you share this plan with them, they're apprehensive. It's different, right? They know how to play the game of school. They know how to do very well in classes without actually learning. They know how to earn A's, but not carry forward the learning that took place in the classroom. They fool everyone. They fool their guidance counselors, their parents, college admissions. When they see that A on the report card, some students, of course, carry forward, with the traditional grading and assessing, but lots of students do not. And that's why they'll struggle in a next year's math class or a next year's Spanish class, because you have to carry forward what you learned so that you can continue to do well on the material or content that's coming your way. So one time I handed out an assessment. It was the start of class and I had papers in my hand, and a student said, oh no, is today a day where we're having a pop assessment? And I said, it is. And they were expecting 2 standards, and one girl in the back said, please don't let this be standard 7. That's what I'm going to call it. Please don't let this be standard 7. And I stopped and I paused and I said, why? Why do you not want it to be standard 7? And she said, because I still don't understand that standard. And I thought that was awesome. Not that she didn't understand, but she knew what she knew and she knew what she did not. She was hoping I'd give her an assessment on standards she already knew. Well, that would have been great for her. But if I had given her standard 7, she had a little bit of a panic and she thought, I'm not ready for this. So I stopped and I made it a lesson for the class. And I said, I forget what her name was, or I said, not that I'd say it now anyway. I said, what does that tell you? And she kind of shrugged around a little bit and was like, that I need to practice in that area so that if it were given today, I'd be ready for it. And I said, exactly, boom. Like that's, you know what you know and you know what you don't. What are you going to do to make sure you know when the time comes? Now that standard wasn't on that assessment. She lucked out, so to speak. But then after she turned it in that day and was leaving class, I called her over and said, hey, let's make a plan. Let's sit down. Let's make sure you understand standard 7 so that when it does come, you're ready for it. And so she did come in. She practiced it, and then I made sure that one was used somewhere soon to the time frame in which she had come in for extra help. And so the next time she took an assessment, that one was on it, and she did very well. And I did that purposely. I wanted her to see the benefit of the whole thing. She didn't do well the first time we took it. She didn't do anything to better her understanding. She was just hoping that it would never be presented to her again. We had that beautiful moment in class where she identified that she knew she didn't understand it. We practiced it together. She practiced it on her own. She did well on it moving forward. And then she thought to herself, wow, I can struggle with something and then learn it and do better next time. And my teacher isn't going to grade my previous misconceptions, whatever we want to call it, with my newfound understanding. That would falsify a grade. He's going to move forward with an accurate measurement for what I understand right now. And so it was beautiful in the sense that students weren't retaking assessments. They were being given multiple opportunities to demonstrate success or understanding on the standards taught in the course. Any standard taught on any given day was fair game. So let's say, well, not fair game. So if we taught standard 8 today, I would never give them an assessment tomorrow on standard 8. They haven't had enough time to process it, to think about it, to practice it, that sort of thing. So if I gave an assessment the following day after having finished teaching in standard 8, it would probably be like standards 3 and 5 or 1 and 6. It would be something like that. I want to give students a chance to digest the feedback that they've had in practice. So anyway, that's my take on retakes. I don't use the word retakes anymore, and a lot of times teachers will say, like, do you want us to give retakes? And no, I just want students to have an opportunity to recover. I want students to have an opportunity to demonstrate understanding by having multiple opportunities to demonstrate that they know what they're doing, and then move away from the average and instead use our professional judgment to determine what a student knows and where they need to grow. I also think that term grades should just be progress reports. I don't think term grades should be averaged at the end of the year, and I'll talk about this in another video, but I don't see any reason why term grades should be averaged. Just because we assessed on 8 standards in term 1 doesn't mean that we're never going to assess on those standards again. That's the way it used to be, and that's the way I had done it in the past. And that would make sense, I guess, that you would average the term grades if that were the case. But I'm constantly going back and revisiting standards. It might be term 3 or 4, and I'm revisiting standards from term 1 and term 2. So what if a student finally something clicks, right? And they finally understand a standard from earlier in the year? Well, I'd be falsifying their grade if I, at the end of the year, use term 1, 2, 3, and 4 and average them together to determine their transcript grade. That doesn't make any sense. And so just use those as progress reports. And at the end of the year, use your professional judgment to determine what a student knows and what they don't know. But I'll talk more about that in another video. That's it for now. My throat's getting sore. This was fun. This is my first video. I look forward to doing it again. I hope you enjoyed the chat. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.